Good morning. Good morning to those in the West and good afternoon to those in the East. Welcome to the Women in TICON Africa Masterclass. Our theme, what it means to show up and stand tall and lead with a presence, is especially timely as we continue to shape women leadership narratives across Africa and beyond. Our conversation today will explore what it really means to command authority, communicate with power, and leverage platforms for impact. This is our second of our series of Women in TICON Africa 2025. My name is Malebogo Khanda-Wiktor, and I will be your host for today, engaging in our insightful session. I would like to thank you for being here. Your presence is indeed an investment in shaping ICT, Africa ICT future. I want to first, to start us off, to introduce the Chairperson of Women in TICON Africa. Before we start this conversation, Ms. Elizabeth Nachanza Mashache, to give us the welcome remarks. Elizabeth, may I hand this over to you?
Thank you so much, Lebo. I hope you can all hear me. On behalf of TICON Africa and Women in TICON Executive, it's my pleasure today to welcome these two phenomenal women who have joined us, Ethel and Cynthia. Thank you for showing up and for saying yes to this conversation. And we really appreciate you for bringing this brilliance into this space. I should mention that we are not only excited, but we are also honestly humbled. We followed your work, we admire your voices, and we are also grateful to have you with us today. I want to steal the spotlight with 4 introductions. That is the job of our capable Vice Chair, Lebo. She will give us the 4 introductions of these two phenomenal women. Ethel and Cynthia, once again, welcome. It is with great excitement that I also welcome all of you in this second edition of our Women in TICON Masterclass Series. This is an initiative that continues to create space for real conversations. At least we should have the powerful learning and also leadership growth among ourselves in both technology and innovation. But today, I'm so happy because we are not only having technologists, but also marketers. At Women in TICON, we are intentional about not only breaking the ceilings, but we also want to build platforms. And I believe today's masterclass is exactly that. And all of us are going to learn on how we can build these platforms. We are happy this time that we are not only diving deep into something that we all know, but something that we always wrestle with. Imagine all of us still wrestle with how can we show up, how can we stand tall, and we saw also how we can also lead with presence. But together, today, under the moderation of our own Vice Chair, these powerhouse women will guide us through the strategy and even the energy behind the executive presence. I encourage everybody of you to learn. You can ask questions, take notes, but above all, let us all reflect on how we can refine and amplify our own leadership presence. As we continue to grow in this masterclass series, we at Women in TICON, we are committed to ensure that every session you lead should not just be a title, but it should be presence, performance, and purpose. But as we are talking about leading with presence, let me also take this opportunity to remind you all that we have the 2025 TICON Africa Conference, and this is happening from 20th to 22nd August in Ghana. This is one of the biggest tech events on the continent. This is where innovators, entrepreneurs, and leaders come together to spark ideas and build partnerships. It's one of the biggest ICT gatherings on the continent, where experts from over 36 countries will converge to discuss the Africa's digital future. But I believe this is our chance also to be part of this Africa's tech future. So if you haven't already registered, I encourage you to secure your spot. Register today, and details are found on all our TICON Africa pages. And in this session, the details will also be shown. But if you have more questions, you can always contact us through the email address. I believe we can put it in the chat for our Women in TICON chapter. I understand men are also preparing in their spaces for this particular event. But let us be clear, we are not sitting this one out. Let's not just talk about presence. We should practice it. So this time around, let's make it a point that we are going to attend this particular event, but not just as participants. We've got spaces for speakers, panelists, and even decision makers. So let's take our time to attend this particular event. Let's do the registration. And finally, I should encourage each one of you to be present in this session today. Be curious, ask more questions, and above all, let's live with a renewed commitment that we are going to own this leadership journey, and we are also going to lift others as we go. I will leave it over to Lebo to continue introducing these two phenomenal women today and take us through the masterclass. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for your presentation on Women in TICON and TICON Africa Conference in general. It is indeed a milestone, and we really look forward to widening our outreach to more women in Africa and everywhere else in the world for African women ICT-driven solutions. And like our chairperson has mentioned, we are joined today by two phenomenal women whose influence spans across technology, corporate leadership, and public engagement. But before I start engaging my two wonderful guests, a bit of housekeeping for our audience. We're looking forward to your questions in the chat. And of course, you'd have the opportunity to raise your hands and speak and ask questions at the end of the conversation. So allow us to finish the conversation and you can pose your questions. On the second part, as indicated by the chairperson, we will have two QR codes. They'll appear intermittently on the screen during this conversation. So you can scan them to learn more about events for Women in TICON Africa and TICON Africa Conference for 2025. And lastly, stay tuned until the end for a video on the TICON Africa Conference 2025, which is in Accra, Ghana, from the 20th to 22nd August 2025. To begin our conversation, I'd like to first introduce our distinguished panelists, two powerhouse women in their fields who exemplify what it means to lead with purpose and presence. Our first panelist is Ethel Cofie, a leading technology entrepreneur and CEO. She is the founder of Edel Technology Consulting, which operates across West Africa and Europe, driving digital transformation and innovation in both corporate and development sectors. Ethel is also the founder of Women in Tech Africa, the continent's largest tech women's group. Ethel, welcome. Please tell us more about your journey, what you do, and how you've managed to stay at the forefront of technology and leadership over the years.
Good morning, and thank you for the invitation. Well, I will say this. Excuse my background. I will say this. I think my work with technology started because I was curious and I wanted to figure out how to build things. And I built a career over the last couple of years starting out in the back end as a software developer, and now in the front end, I suppose, as an MD, and now doing governance work, sitting on boards and helping direct strategy. Women in Tech, we built because I felt there was a need to bring women. You have to remember this was almost 10 years ago now. We felt a need to bring women together in the space to essentially create the girls club. How do we learn from each other? How do we build with each other? How do we open doors with each other? And I think that's been the theme of my career. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much, Ethel. Joining us next is Cynthia. Cynthia is a seasoned corporate communication strategist and the group head of marketing, corporate affairs, and customer experience at Hollard Ghana Holdings. With a strong background in public relations and brand development, Cynthia is also a visible advocate for women in leadership and storytelling as a tool for transformation. I love the part about storytelling, Cynthia. Cynthia, we are excited to have you with us. Please share with us more about your work and what sustained your leadership journey in both corporate and community spaces.
Yes, thank you very much. I am super excited to be here. I love the fact that, this is a collaborative venture between tech and marketing, and partly because I know that we can only succeed as communications and marketing professionals if we have the right tech tools and the right partners in tech. So yes, I am currently leading everything brand communications and customer experience at Hollard Ghana, which is a group of insurance companies in Ghana that has a life and general business. I am also the board chair of one of the biggest nonprofits that's running a Mastercard Foundation funded project called Springboard Roadshow Foundation. And then I'm also non-executive director of board of a company called GMMF as a mutual fund. Yes, I totally love leading work that is impactful, that tells stories for brands, and it's really been my life for the last, I don't know, since I started working in 2008. Full-time, I must say. I have led a very storied life, working across a few continents and learning a lot of things and doing everything I could in the marketing and communication space. Today, I am very excited to pass on my insights and my learnings and, just stories of how my career has panned out with younger women, because I do know that I would have benefited even more than I did if I'd had that insight sharing at the time that I really needed it. That said, I am also very privileged to say that in my career, I've had wonderful women bosses, and I do believe that they have also inspired who I am today as a corporate leader and as someone who leads impact for my brand and other brands also as a consultant on this side. So that's pretty much me. Yes, I've had a few pretty cool awards, international awards for Provoke Media and locally by CIMG. And I think it's just been validating of the effort that I've put in. So wonderful to be here. Thank you for the invitation and excited to jump into the conversation.
Thank you both for those inspiring introductions. I actually met Ethel, I've not told her this, back in 2015 at a Facebook event. And when I listened to her conversations when she commanded the session, I felt like I want to be like her when I grow up. Don't ask me my age. But now let's dive into how you have both managed to command authority and influence in your respective, more especially for women in spaces where leadership doesn't actually look like us. To get us started, maybe I could just start with Ethel. When we talk about standing tall, especially in industries or boardrooms where women are often underrepresented, what does that mean to you personally?
Okay. Well, for me, standing tall, I hope I have my. Okay. For me, standing tall is about occupying space unapologetically, right? The idea is that standing tall is choosing to be visible over being silent, even when the rooms that you're in are not built to accommodate you. It is about anchoring yourself in competence and not waiting for somebody else's validation to go out and do the things that you need to do. So for me, as a woman in male-dominated rooms, I remind myself, I have worked hard. I have earned my seats. I, I bring value that speaks louder than any bias that might be in the room. So that's how I think about standing tall.
That's very powerful, Ethel. Your presence is personal than just being there. But as a quick follow-up, maybe one could ask, how have you navigated those perceptions or biases around authority, especially when people may not expect to see a woman in charge?
I think I think over the years, how I navigate has changed, and also the older I get, how I navigate has changed. At this point in my life, I am more apt to fight bias head on, right? I will call it out, but partly because I am at a point in my career where if I walk into a room, most times, my reputation would have preceded me. Look, I try to make bias irrelevant, right? When I earlier in my career, I over prepared, I outperformed. You know, I actually have a strategy document I have somewhere where I have actually listed out the different things that you face when you go into the boardroom and how to work with it. There are times it is disarming with humor. There are times it is just deadpanning and asking people to explain why they think of you in a certain way or why they made the comment that they've made. I don't know that there is one size fits all. Depends on the room that you are in. But for me, I started out very much making sure that every room that I entered, I had a brilliant coach that helped me. That every room that I entered, at least a couple of my reputation was preceding me going into those rooms. And if I failed bias in those rooms, then in the moment, I would make the calculation on are we dealing with it with humor? Are we dealing with it head on? Are we crafting the narrative and making the bias irrelevant? So yeah, it's not for me it's not been a straightforward way, but I will always address it. So if somebody said something in the room that I thought was inappropriate, I would say it would, I think my go-to would be, I would love you to explain further what you meant by that comment, or if somebody tried to speak over me. I actually have a series where I walk through how to deal with being spoken over in meetings, and sometimes it is just keep talking until the person gets tired and they stop, or it is addressing it head on and saying, I will let me finish making my point. I will give you a chance to speak. So it's different different ways at different times.
I'm actually curious, Ethel. Maybe you could give us a moment when you had to really show up and command the room. What happened and how did you anchor yourself? Just an example to just nitpick on your experience on a personal note.
Right. Well, okay. This happened years ago. It was a client meeting. I think it was the first client meeting, and we were discussing price, and so at some point this potential client, I think, picked up my hand and looked at my nail polish on the side. I'm not quite sure what. Yeah, and then said, "Oh, why are you so expensive? Is it because are you buying your nail polish outside this country?"
Oh my God, that is so offensive.
Oh, yes. I think in the moment, I snatched my hand back because why are you touching me? But also, I decided in that moment, I decided that I made a joke and I said, well, if I'm buying it from outside, it's expensive, so you do need to pay. But also, this is my experience. But here's the thing that I did that I find funny out of it, because that particular client, oh God, it's been 10 plus years now, that particular client paid 3 times for the service that anybody else paid for the service. Because I charged them an inconvenience. In my head, it was an inconvenience fee for having to work with someone that didn't have boundaries. Again, it's not necessarily your stereotypical way of dealing with it, but like I said, I find ways of, so I paid myself more for that one project to assuage myself from the dealing with people who did not know how to deal with boundaries.
Taking charge of your presence, basically. But let me just dive to Cynthia to rope her in. One of the things we hear often is that women in leadership walk a fine line, and authority sometimes is misread as being too aggressive or too loud. So, listening at Ethel, how can we assert ourselves powerfully without being misunderstood?
Yes, so just before I answer that, I was laughing at what Ethel said because I have experienced that type of microaggression, and I totally get it. And I find that all of us women do the same thing. We are highly offended, yet we laugh it off and we make a joke, and I've found that, interestingly enough, now that I'm a bit older, I find that I don't do that as much as I used to do that. And I think Ethel probably will be, if you were to ask her, she probably doesn't do that as much anymore. If you you say something offensive, a joke that is offensive, now I would just look at you like, really? Whereas in the past I would, laugh it off, make a joke just to ease the awkwardness of it. And, it's interesting how that happens a lot when you're a woman in the room, and possibly one of the few women, or you're a woman in authority trying to push an agenda for whatever reason. But back to my question. So, when I saw this question, I laughed to myself because I said, I'm the perfect person to talk about this because I am not an authoritative figure. When you see me in person, I am, I wouldn't say smallish, but I am slim built. I look much, much younger than my age. I didn't appreciate that, but thank you, God. And so that presented a challenge because how did I struggled with having a presence, regardless of what I knew, I just didn't have a presence. Maybe I'd walk into the room and they'll be like, oh, nice lady, but I didn't have that presence that said, leader, I'm here to, change things. And, part of my journey saw me trying different things out. So at some point in time, I tried being very serious, which could be translated as aggression and, very take no prisoners in my approach. But ultimately, I learned how to assert myself, without necessarily, being overly aggressive, but also understanding that by nature, I didn't have that authority that automatically just, commanded presence with just by virtue of who I was. Now, what I did was I understood that and I accepted it because, it's not going to change. The way I look is not going to change. How I walk in is not going to change. However, my mindset about it will change. And, I had a female boss, Ikia, who once told me something. She said, Cynthia, when you walk in the room and you talk, everybody forgets how you look. It's really about what you're saying and, how you're delivering. And, ultimately, in terms of asserting yourself without being misunderstood, I would say one thing is absolutely important. How you say things matters. You may not necessarily have a full confidence. And one thing I always like to share with, especially younger professionals, is that don't think that all of us are so confident just by nature. We built this confidence. And a lot of times we are doing things nervous. We are doing things anxious. We are doing things scared. It's just that we have built a way to move beyond it. And I mean, the people who know me closely know me when I say something and I say, I'm putting on my Cynthia, right? Which is me putting on confidence. It may not necessarily mean I feel confident, but I found that when I put on that confidence, it's a mindset and I say, hey, we are going to do this. And I'm walking into a boardroom and, looking at my background, I've done a lot of presentations in very many boardrooms. You know, so you have that thing where just before you enter, you tell yourself, regardless of whatever it is, I know what I'm talking about. I'm about to deliver it. The people there do not necessarily know what I have to say. You know, so whatever I say at this point in time works. We can figure the rest out later. So that level of confidence in your tone and your language gives you, you know, asserts you without you even making an extra effort or without worrying about how you look or being overly aggressive. You don't need to come, you know, guns blazing or whatnot. That just having that self-assuredness. Now, I also want to say that with that self-assuredness, you know, you have to understand that you have to set your boundaries and set expectations early. So, you know, what should people expect from you? How do you intend to deliver? What do you want to do? Being able to say what makes sense, what doesn't make sense is also really important, because when you do that, it establishes you as a leader. You know, when you do that, you make your presence felt. And another thing too is that being able to speak up clearly. So I tend to do this with people. Sometimes you are talking and you mumble. And I rumble a lot, I mumble a lot. But in the moment that is required, I have learned to raise my voice and speak up clearly. And that's something women also need to know, because you realize that you go for a meeting, you know, you may be the leader, but your voice is not as heard. You may be making a valid point, but your voice is soft. And so in that sense, in order to assert your self, you have to find a way to speak up clearly. Look, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody, as we call it in Ghana, bass, you know, you fumble on your words and stuff. No problem. Just keep it moving. So I think those are essentially very important. Being confident with the way you speak and how you present the things that you're saying, being clear with your points, your expectations from the get-go with whoever you're talking to. And then also what people don't talk about is this. It's very easy to talk. When you figure it out, it's easy to talk, it's easy to sell, but it's not easy to deliver. Now, without a doubt, your ability to be respected as someone who knows what they are doing, someone who has authority, as someone who is a leader, is your ability to show working. And I know I'm sure the conversation will talk a lot more about that, but I ultimately have found that just by delivering in my job, just by doing what I say I would, by putting in that effort, it actually sells the leader without me even trying. Yeah.
Cynthia, I love how you frame it. Practically speaking, we do exist in a very male-dominated environment with a lot of high pressure, and you just shared the various strategies that you personally use to build that influence and, you know, establish your presence. It's empowering indeed. But I'd like to hear from the both of you on something that many women actually struggle with. We wrestle with the imposter syndrome. But how do you distinguish now being respected for just your role? No. How do you distinguish being respected just for your role or title versus being respected for your voice, your values, and your vision? Maybe I could start with Ethel on that. Your mic is mute. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. It's an interesting question, right? So when you have a position, you have a position, and the respect is imbued on you because you are a board chair or you are a C-level executive. And then it is important that your voice and your vision also be respected. But part of that is how you are carrying that voice. Now, I've seen different ways of holding your voice up. I've seen introverts do it quietly, but still powerfully. I think one of the things that we tend to do is we try to say your voice must be, for your voice to be heard, you must be a little bit extroverted. But on one of the boards, I'm very lucky. For the boards that I do not chair, I also have very many wonderful women board chairs. And I find that I have also dealt with board chairs that are very quiet, introverted, but still might be the last person to speak in the room, but what it is said is very powerful and it's all encompassing. So I have to always be careful when I say this, because I'm happy to speak up in the room, but I've had coaches say you don't necessarily always need to speak in volumes for your point to be made or for your vision to be carried. And so my take on it is here: if you're extroverted, you speak up when you need to speak up, but you need to learn to use silence also, right? A strategic silence, and when you speak, so it might be that you do not speak on everything, but you speak last, but you speak with a very powerful gate on an overarching view on the topic, right? And leave it at that. And if you are introverted, then that we want you, even though you're apt to be silenced, then we want you to speak a little bit more. My thing also, especially for women, is we are very good with the rules, and so we want to, I'm waiting for my turn to speak. And if you work in consulting like me, where with a lot of egos in the room, I'm waiting for you will not get your turn to speak, because a lot of people love to hear the sound of their own voice. And so there is a conversation on how to take away, how to come in, swoop in, and come in and swoop in and take away conversation. It is actual training. How do you, in the middle of a conversation, step in and speak up, and not do the thing where a lot of women do, where we wait to be it's like school. You raise your hand and then ask to speak. But if you've got a powerful voice and something powerful to say, I like women to speak up more, but also to be strategic about how they speak. When I go into, I did a radio interview last night, I am very clear the impression that I want to leave behind. I'm very clear, not just the technical skill that I want to share, but it is the impression or the vision of myself that I want to leave behind in that speech. And I'd like that to be sort of the way we think about showing up and using our voice and earning our voice and our visions.
Thank you, Ethel. Can I assume you are actually an introvert? From what you've been mentioning, you sound like an introvert who's actually found their footing in the boardroom.
Yes, unfortunately, people don't believe me anymore when I say I'm an introvert, but I am. I prefer being by myself a lot of the time, but yes, I've had to learn how to manage the space, and nobody believes me anymore when I say I'm an introvert.
I believe you, but maybe let's hear from Cynthia, because I think she's also an introvert.
Not exactly. So with that one, I guess you have yourself two opposites, because I would like to call myself like an extroverted introvert or an introverted. I do enjoy my me time, but generally I'm extroverted. So yes, I am a people person. I do enjoy engaging, and I want to pick my mind from that angle. I think for me, what has been vital in terms of influence building is relationships. So being extroverted has helped me because I'm able to talk to people. And, with that, I'm able to, engage stakeholder engagement. Really, that's what it is. I never walk into a meeting not having spoken to all the key people, especially if I have an agenda. So if there's something I'm trying to push, I'm trying to propose, whatever, it's important to me that all parties in the conversation have heard what I have to say before we walk in there. And I found a way to engage them on what their concerns are, what their interests are. So by the time I walk into the room, I have made use of those relationships to be able to construct a strong argument, to say something positive, or at least be able to, defend myself. And I have found that when you do that, you're not caught what's that expression? Not cut, pants down, because you have used your relationships to the extent where, you know what's coming. And even generally beyond boardrooms and meetings and engagements and whatnot, the relationships are important, because once people have a personal engagement with you, what happens is that they look out for you. Once you have a relationship with people, you then have the type of influence in a space. And this is we are talking about male dominated and technical spaces here, right? And the truth is that, yes, it's very interesting navigating male spaces, because obviously men have a different perspective. They are oriented differently. How they do things and how they approach things is very different, especially in our cultural orientation, where, they don't even know where the line is in terms of inappropriate jokes and whatnot. But you do have to learn a skill, and that skill is like nurturing relationships, having the right friendships, identifying which people have the key voices, identifying which people need you to support them as an ally here and there, so you have to be strategic. Frankly speaking, there is a lot of strategy in influence building, in being present in those spaces, because you can't enter rooms, you can't have engagements, you can't lead things in male-dominated spaces when you don't have allies, and that's a vital thing to keep in mind. Build your allies, build relationships across board. Don't look for the easiest relationships to build. Sometimes try to build the relationships of the people who seem to be your detractors. They actually might end up being your promoters, and ultimately doing your homework is extremely vital. You got to know what you're doing, know what you're saying. And for me, that has been so important, because like Ethel mentioned about rooms where there are so many egos. If you don't know what you're talking about, you will crumble, you will be in the background, so if you know what you're talking about, that alone gives you confidence. So imagine that you have done your homework, you know what you're talking about, you have built relationships, you have engaged people, built your allies and whatnot. That is absolutely vital. At the end of the day, all of these things are important for you to be able to, make an impact ultimately in these spaces, because it's a very take no prisoners world in the male spaces. And, as a woman who wants to, if you don't want to be dismissed, you have to come correct. You have to come also mirroring the characteristics sometimes. And this has been, I've seen that some people have written articles about this where, as a woman, should you mirror the characteristics of men, being very, men speak up in meetings without they interrupt and whatnot. And I'd say that, yes, by all means, be yourself. Yes, by all means, be as polite and whatnot, but nobody's going to take you seriously if, like Ethel said, you're waiting to be called. You have to learn how to insert yourself in one way or the other, because that's the only way that you're actually going to get things done. So for me, it has worked really well. It has been fantastic in both corporate, and it has also been fantastic when I was working agency side consulting, because it helps me to, engage parties. It helps me to be able to establish myself as a knowledgeable person before and in rooms and, leading projects and, also, I think that in some sense, if you're accountable for yourself, that's also another key thing to keep in mind. If you're accountable for yourself, you're accountable for, your successes and your failures, you speak up before anybody else speaks up about things that are not working out. There's an understanding that you know what you're talking about. You're not waiting for somebody to point it out that, hey, you missed this or you missed that. No, I don't wait for anybody to tell me that. I'm like, hey, I noticed that this was not working out. So X, Y, Z. There's always a plan. There's always, we always have plan B, plan C, plan D. Even if in the moment we don't have the plan, we will make that plan in the moment. So you do have to be sharp in terms of your strategy. If you are building influence, it's the level of intentionality is not taught to us. Unfortunately, you kind of have to pick it up on the way. Or if you are blessed and privileged, by some osmosis, get it from the people around you as you are growing in your career. But I mean, for me, like I said, it's work. Stakeholder engagement, absolutely important. Building relationships, absolutely important. Doing your homework, being accountable, all of these things help you to establish yourself in male spaces and technical spaces too. Yeah.
Very grounded messages. It's here, both of you are saying respect is not just about position, it's about impact. So what you say has to have an impact, but you've also shifted gears to now noting on how we should shape how we lead. This is how we speak and how we are heard, whether we are in a boardroom, a stage, or even in a virtual room. So now maybe just to pick more on what you both said, to start with you, Ethel, I want to just pick a bit on your public speaking, how it led you to visibility in your leadership. For women, for many women, it doesn't come naturally, and I'm one of those that struggle with public speaking. How did you build that confidence? You said I'm already in part of what you said earlier, and giving your voice that communication vibe over the years that I've actually been following you, Ethel. So let me just give you a disclaimer that I've been following you as a fan. Let me just give us how you've been doing it. Your mic is mute.
Yes, yes. It's very interesting. So I think the public speak for me, public speaking was a very deliberate plan. So when I started my business, and I realized that one of my difficulties is when I walked into the room, I was a young woman, and people were not necessarily, even though I had, years of experience. I had a master's in distributed systems. I had years of experience building systems across the world. When I came back to Ghana to start a business, when I walked into the room, people sort of thought, what is this little girl doing here? Trying to sell us software. And so my coaches at the time said, what we're going to do is to ensure that when you walk into a room, that people know who you are before you get in the room. At least half the people. So I think the theory was that Ethel, that you never walk into a room, or there's never a conversation about certain spaces where your name doesn't come up. Technology, women, leadership, where your name doesn't come up. And two, when your name comes up, you shouldn't have people say, who is she? People must know who you are. So the speaking, the public speaking was very, very deliberate, right? So I started out volunteering myself, but I think I've always done public speaking in some form, right? So like you do drama in school. I don't know that it was necessarily a difficult thing for me to do. It is that there are some stages that are more scary than others, right? And when I've been on, when I've headed to a stage where I've just been, scared out of my mind, I've always, to this day, mirrored the person that I know is the most confident, which is my mother. And so I think the first time I was 21 years old, and I was going to speak on the convergence of technology. I was in university and I'd written a really interesting article on, at the time, the convergence of telephone and TV and that sort of thing. And some nonprofit had seen the paper and they were doing a conference and they had invited me. I mean, so imagine this 21-year-old, and there were people in the room, there were regulators from all over Africa in the room. And in that, I mirrored the person that I knew. So I took on the persona, and I think a lot of introverts do this. I took on the persona of my mother. So I was thinking of how she would speak up, or how she would act in a room, and how she would, speak up in the room. And so I forgot about myself a little bit in that moment, right? Where you take on the persona. People do this quite a bit. So I take on the persona because she's, she'll make a joke, she'll say something, she'll diffuse. And even till today, I will, even when I'm really nervous, I will go up on stage and I will try and say something funny, and to try to calm myself down and everybody down. And so I think for me, I had to do the public speaking thing to help myself. My confidence has been built on surviving, right? So there's a video of me at the National Women's Conference from maybe 2-3 years ago. I'm in the middle of speaking, and it's a fit of like coughing. I start coughing, and I think it's whether the air is cold or whatever. It's really bad because it's a huge conference and all these people are there. And while I'm coughing, and I in the middle of coughing, I think to myself, oh God, this is embarrassing. But I pick up the mic and I say, well, it looks like I've spoken a lot, and the air is trying to tell me it's time for me to wrap up. And everybody laughs. And then, my team took that video and we put it out, and we made the joke that Ethel 0, my enemies 1, and that was it. It was a funny joke, and we moved on from there. And so that's how I navigated public speaking and issues with stages that scare me.
What I'm picking is that confidence truly is a muscle. You had to train it so much that even in an embarrassing moment, you could recover so quickly because you put yourself to a situation, whatever may arise, even amidst a national event where everybody's watching you. Cynthia.
Hello.
We've known you for storytelling, a very powerful tool, which many will use. How can, I know Ethel used her strategies and it's really worked for her. She's done public speaking, but you're using storytelling as your tool. How can women refine their storytelling, not just to speak, but to inspire more as lead?
So yes, indeed, I have been telling stories even before I realized that I was telling stories. I found that, if you're gonna use storytelling wherever, and it could be as simple as addressing, let's say addressing staff, or, as sophisticated as, some kind of a fancy board meeting or whatnot. I think the first thing to understand is, what's the whole point? What's the purpose? Why should people care? And with that purpose, there's also a little bit of background work, which is all the people that are in the room, what matters to them. So one trick that I've always done is I always Google everybody in a room. I mean, obviously, if it's a small room, yay. If it's not a small room, then I guess I'll have to figure out the group and be like, okay, this group, what did they do? What are they known for? Who are the key players? All of that stuff. Now, when I do that, it gives me a sense of what these people care about, what's interesting to them, And so for me, then I'm like, okay, how do I marry my purpose, my agenda with what these people care about? How do I find something that, resonates with them? So then I'm like, okay, this is a staff town hall. Staff have been, let's just say, during COVID, COVID was such an interesting time because it tested us in different ways. What do they care about? What makes sense? So you pick a topic that is important to them and you marry that with yours, and you end up coming up with some kind of a storyline that segues you into the points that you want to make. And it's very important because if you do that, you set a ground. So you set a ground, a basis where people are locked in. When you start talking, there's one thing about telling stories on, or just, making a point. When you start talking, you could lose people quickly. So the first few things you say and how you say it have to bring people in. You have to let people see that it's an all-in thing. Right. So if you have your purpose in mind, you have understood the people in the room, you have found a way to bring them in. You tell a story that may be relevant. When I say tell a story, I don't necessarily always mean in Ghana we have Anansi. I'm not saying Anansi stories. Once upon a time there was Anansi in the forest and stuff. No, not necessarily. It could literally be we've been in the news lately because of 1, 2, 3. I can imagine that as the retail head, this is the concern you have for this. How do we ensure that our agents going out there are not 1, 2, 3, 4? So when you have that in mind and you have that grounding, then you're able to then, do things like bringing in examples. And even from what I was just saying right now, the story has to include people. You're not just standing talking at them. You have to include them. So if you're including them, you have to bring in purposeful stories and anecdotes that are relevant to them in the manner that they can relate to. So if they relate to those stories, they are better able to pick it up. I remember at AMC last year, I did a presentation, and I remember that there was a part where I talked about budget, and I was like, all of you here as CMOs, head marketers, whatnot, we all share the same problem. And it was so funny because everybody was like, budget. And I was like, that's it, right? So you have to bring people in. You have to use examples of things that they can relate to. And then at the end of the day, you have to be authentic. So I am naturally a little awkward. I'm naturally a little weird. And, over the years, I've stopped trying to be less so because I'm like, at this point, I don't know what again I'm going to do. This is who I am. But it has worked for me because it means that my little awkwardness makes me memorable. It makes me memorable. It makes my message memorable. So you have to also try and find your thing and be yourself when you're delivering, because that is also what differentiates you from other people. Just be, there's a lot to say about self-acceptance over here. Self-acceptance is very important because it helps you deliver your message without taking yourself too seriously. And all of that actually helps you to tell your story better. I don't need to talk about the hard things about, what are you saying? You have to say it well, use numbers. I feel like you could easily do a Google search and you find those points online. So it's clear. Yes, you have to have your points. You have to know what you're saying when you're telling a story. Where do you want to go? How do you round up with the call to action? All of those things, yes. But the things that really matter are the things that you would use to deliver home that point. Pull people into your story, what you're saying, and ultimately leave them with a hook and the feeling that, that they are like, wow, okay, and maybe I've not thought about it this way. Maybe, some kind of emotional. I'm very big on, using emotions as well, like drawing some kind of emotions in your conversation or your whatever it is, your presentation, your engagement, to get people to pay attention to what you have to say. And ultimately, being very authentic with yourself also helps to deliver everything. So, I mean, for me, those are some of the tricks I've used over the years, telling stories and getting people to my viewpoint. And I have to say the humor is always great, but you just have to use it very well. Humor, absolutely good. Just use it very well. If you're going to be self-deprecating, also measure that deprecation before you end up looking, end up making yourself look too bad, especially as a woman. So there's also a balance to that. So I think for me, that's what's worked. Yeah.
It's interesting that you also mentioned sometimes the message doesn't land, and worse, it's even met with resistance and indifference. But the approach there is take it as it is and find a common ground to bounce back. You also brought out the aspect of authenticity. Now, this is professionalism versus authenticity. How do we balance this? Maybe I should just throw it back to you first, Cynthia, and then I could have Ethel as well to share. How do you balance that? Because we lose it sometimes just that we match with the environment that to.
Right. I don't even know if there's a balance. Like, how does authenticity negatively impact professionalism? I mean, really, I am someone who typically has very colored hair. I often would love bright colored hair just because, frankly speaking, I had natural hair at a time that it wasn't so common and popular. I didn't know what to do with my hair. I was just like, let me just dye it. And I was like, oh, it kind of looks crazy bright, but it works. And, I played around with it and all the while showing up as serious as I could. So now you couldn't say that, hey, this person is not serious because she has brightly colored hair, because I'm delivering on all fronts, but I'm still authentic because that's that lady with the interesting hair coming by, although she has a lot of great to say. So I would say for me, like authenticity, it's also a journey. Some of these things you don't figure it out in a day. You just come to it. So I'll leave it there. You come to it. Yeah.
So, your thoughts?
Authenticity is such an interesting thing because it's something I no longer have a problem with, right? It's very interesting because actually when I'm in the boardroom and I'm not truth telling, or somebody's not getting, sometimes I will get pulled aside and asked, oh, is everything okay? Why? Because people know that when Ethel is in the boardroom and something is not going right, or Ethel needs to say something, and it's a difficult conversation, Ethel is first to have that difficult conversation. I've never been afraid to have difficult conversations. So that's part of the brand now. And so I would say last year our central bank had an event. Was it last 2 years? Central bank had an event, and I was sitting on stage with our top telecom CEOs, and I think one C-level executive made a point which people in the ecosystem might disagree with. But I looked up and I realized half the eyes in the room turned to me, which was interesting because their expectation was that this person had said something a little bit off kilter, and Ethel was going to set him right. And it was very funny because when I took the mic, everybody said, yes, we've been waiting. Right. And so it's no longer a battle I have to fight. People have expect me to be the one that will have the tough conversations. They expect me to be the one that will say, I don't think this is right. I think you're going off, which has helped the career, which I find very funny. But because I was told at the beginning of my career that this behavior would tank me. Speaking up and saying I disagree, I was told this you would not get far when you behave like this. But again, like Cynthia said, it's a journey, right? What I was doing my first 5 years and what I'm doing now in terms of how I can speak the truth, right? I will, in how I speak it, that has evolved over time. But definitely, and I'll end with this story. I met at a meeting with a very important CEO of a company. It was the 100-year company, very successful, great P&L. And I, as you can see the rings on my fingers. I love brass rings, and so I wear lots of brass rings with the earrings and things like that. And I remember thinking, we're going to the meeting. Well, this is my first meeting with this person. I wonder if I should tone it down a little bit. It was a thought. And so instead of I wore one ring and I entered. The funny thing is, when I entered the room, the CEO of this company had earrings all the way up from here, all the way down, and she had brass rings from this hand and that hand. And I started laughing. And I thought to myself, actually, this is funny because we would have connected more if I had shown up with my earrings and my brass rings, because she had exact same style. And I said to her, I love your rings, and where do you get them? And we had this whole conversation about looking for brass rings across Africa, and I bought mine in Rwanda and whatever. So I've learned, for me personally, it's like the universe of God, whoever you choose to believe in. Every time I try to say, oh, maybe I need to tone it down a little bit, I will always get a reminder. I always get a reminder that I do not need to tone it down, that I need to bring the fullness of myself into my professional arena. And that's what I've done. I've always done. I've tried to always do.
I love how you both are not tired of reminding us that we should not shrink back or cower to fit in your room. Just bring your full self in with thought and, of course, with strategy that actually remains or gives you that sensitivity of who you are, and it gives you a good blend in with that to interact. I'm loving because it speaks of your branding, how you brand yourself, Cynthia, how you brand yourself, Ethel. And
Level
we
1 minute.
now exist.
Level, can I? Sorry, I apologize, but I had a
Yes,
hard stop
no
at
problem.
10:45. I have a national assignment I need to get to, and so I really did enjoy this discussion. But I am now being signaled that I need to hop off the call. Thank you very much for the invitation, and I will follow along as I head to my next meeting.
Thank you very much. You're welcome, and we look forward to further engagement in the future. Thank you, Ethel, and we'll continue with Cynthia. We don't have much time remaining. Thank you very much, Ethel. Have a wonderful afternoon. Cynthia, are you still there? We'll have a hard stop at 13:10. Yes.
Yes, no problem. That's fine.
Thank you so much. I loved her conversation around how we have to be present in our full self. But now we're speaking of branding ourselves in a digital economy. You have to be present both virtually and offline. You've mentioned that you're not a social media person, but I love your presence on social media. Could you tell us a bit of your approach? How should we be mindful when creating ourselves online and creating that presence?
Right. So I find that I am my own guinea pig. In essence, I'm always trying to figure it out myself. And the truth is, like I think I mentioned to you off the stage, I mentioned to you that generally I'm not the best person on social media. Because I would tell if you had to, ask me to do training and whatnot, absolutely. I know what to say. I know what to do. I don't necessarily practice it fully. But here's the thing. If you do, it's fantastic. And, in spite of that, I think that the biggest thing here is this. If you craft what you want to present to the world, you do all the beautiful things that ChatGPT will tell you to do. What's your visual outlook? What do you want to focus on? What are the topics? Which areas you want to push? Then there comes the thing like consistency. So in order to really establish your presence and, influence, you have to be consistent. You have to determine that I'm going to post twice a week, I'm going to post maybe once a week and all of that stuff. But the reality, and for me, what has happened is the reality is life gets in the way. And so, yes, I may have wonderful things to share, but I find myself going 1 month and I've not posted on LinkedIn. And, unfortunately, I don't necessarily I may not get the traction I'm looking for, but the truth is that the times that I've been consistent keep me buoyed, keep me present, keep me visible. And because I have actually done some work in the past, when I take off and I am not present, I still have that visibility. So you can't be completely absent. Unfortunately, where the world has gotten to, you cannot say, oh, it's not my thing, I am not interested, all of that stuff. No, because now it's a bare minimum. They're even using social media presence for visas and stuff. So if you're not on, then there's a problem. So you do need to make that effort, regardless of your interest. However, when you make that effort, you also have to accommodate for how your life works. So for instance, if you're going to start, don't be too ambitious and start posting every single day, knowing very well that in a month's time, you're leading a project that is going to take you up and about. You may not actually have time to craft the level of poster you want to. You also want to be mindful of your community. And I remember one time somebody messaged me politely on LinkedIn, and the gentleman said, hello, Cynthia, I haven't seen a post from you in a while. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, well, thank you. Thank you for that. I didn't realize that, yes, I had people waiting to see my post. So, yes, there's that. And if you can afford it, I do think that, and here's where I need to take that advice myself. If you can afford it, we get into the place where people are actually giving their socials to people to curate for them, just to ensure that they are consistent and to ensure that they are telling their stories. Because truth be told, if you actually had to probably put a gun to my head and give me a specific time in a day where I don't have any interruptions, I could probably come up with a post on something, a story to tell about some matter to post, but you may not have the time, energy, all of that to get it done. So perhaps you could outsource it as needed. So in terms of, building, it's very easy to talk about all the good things, but the reality of the moment is where you craft how your presence will be online. You need to ensure that regardless of whether you are active or not, you have a presence, and that presence speaks for you when you're not in the room virtually. So I think that's also really important. And then in terms of building your presence, also engaging in the right communities, following the right people, getting the right people to follow you as well. That's something people don't talk about. And I am an advocate for not necessarily accepting every single LinkedIn invitation. And that's because I have found that, yes, one time I went somewhere to a university and the students wanted to all send me LinkedIn invites. And I later realized that it had changed the types of engagements I was having on my page. I'm just being really honest with you. And I realized that because I had added a lot of these much younger people in these spaces, I was not seeing people that I felt will also be very vital to my perspective and my career and whatnot. So I learned that, okay, I needed to be a bit more circumspect so that I didn't dilute my timeline, and also ensure that I'm still visible to the types of people that I want to be visible to. So, and all of the things that we've said, I think all the points we've made right down to leveraging social media and professional platforms, there's one key word here, which is being intentional. You do have to put in some effort to be intentional. And regardless of what anybody says, there's that intentionality. There has to be a little bit in there. And being intentional will come with taking your time to sit down, figure things out, analyze, strategize. They don't teach us in school these things, but you learn along the way that it's very, very important. It's literally the foundation for getting anything done.
You're mentioning do's and don'ts, and I love that because many of us just want to be there all the time. We just want to competing with those that probably have time.
Exactly. Yes. And somebody, just to say that someone once told me something that stuck in my head forever. This person was like, if you're posting on LinkedIn every day, are you actually working? And I was like, huh. And that's no shade to people who are consistent and active. It's just that, if you overdo it too, then people are like, are you sure you're actually doing what you say you are doing? Because how are you so active? Because we all know that, life is busy. Sometimes things happen.
Yeah.
I'm losing you a tad bit. I didn't hear that. I think I've lost you. Hello?
Are we still there, Cynthia? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you clearer now. Yes. Okay. I can hear you.
I was just talking about the online presence. You do have a voice on your platforms. Has there been any open doors or a career trajectory that gave you that momentum from being on present online? Maybe share an experience or...
Yes. Absolutely. And I just want to say that this is not restricted to just jobs. We're not talking about people reaching out, headhunters reaching out per se. It's bigger than that. It's also being visible to people who have engagements, public speaking engagements. It's also being seen as, someone who has something important to say, worth listening to. And so through social media, I've had tons and tons of engagements where, public speaking opportunities. I've had networking opportunities. Obviously, sometimes with that, you also have to do a little bit of sifting because you might get a lot that you have to figure out which ones are real and valid and, important enough. So I've actually met friends. I have built relationships on social media. And that's not just LinkedIn, by the way, even platforms like Instagram as well. I have built communities on those spaces where, the community may not necessarily deliver in the moment, but several times, in fact, let me even give you an example. Ethel and I are probably more active on social media as friends. And Ethel even sent me a birthday cake one time. And it's not like we had even hung out or anything like that. Do you understand? This was through social media, us admiring each other's work, admiring the things that each other says and does online, and being just appreciative of the efforts that the other person has put into. And ultimately, for me as well, I have used social media to hire. So I'm just going to leave it there.
Thank you so very much. I see that we do have quite a number of things common between you and Ethel, and that relationship already has been established. And this has been a powerful conversation to help us see how showing up with presence isn't just walking into a room, but it's also about the way we share our voices, tell our stories, and intentionally shape how we are seen and heard, both offline and online. On the final part of our discussion, I just wanted to slow things down a bit, but due to time, I just want to allow some questions for the next few minutes. We may not be able to take all the questions due to time, but please just allow 5 minutes of our time to allow the participants online to share any questions. If you have any questions, please do raise your hand in the platform or throw it into the chat.
Sure.
I see that there's quite a number of comments there. If there's a hint, anybody want to say anything? I'll read out a comment here from Jackie. Good afternoon from Kampala, Uganda. It's great to be in the room with amazing women doing their thing on the continent. Cynthia will catch up next month in the conference. So this is for you, Cynthia.
Hi, Jackie. See you soon.
And then there's another one from Elizabeth. Thank you for the session. It's really informative. I wanted to ask how you would handle imposter syndrome, especially in a male-dominated environment like tech. Thank you, Elizabeth, for that. Maybe let's take the next one if there's another question, and you can tackle them both due to our time crunch. I think that's the only question for now, Cynthia. Would you like to take that on?
Yes, I tried to address that very quickly earlier, and it's by understanding that no one is perfect. Excuse me, sorry about that. So no one is perfect. That's the first thing. You need to get over your feeling of failure and being scared of things going bad. Things will go bad. Just accept that fact, Okay, I just realized that this is exactly what Ethel talked about earlier. About coughing.
I apologize, I made you talk.
I'm going to use that as she said that it's time to get away. But listen, you have to find a way to fake it to make it. Honestly, that's just it. You have to find a way to fake it. Regardless of the anxiety, the nervousness, you really do need to teach yourself. When you fake it, nobody knows that you're not confident. If you make a mistake, you recover. And it's a muscle. You need to practice, teach yourself. And after a while, it becomes you. I'll leave it there so that I can cough.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Well, there is quite a number of takeaways from this. And of course, presence is intentional, like you said. It's all about authority. It does not necessarily need aggression. My voice is power. And even on the platforms, we can use it for our visibility, leaving a digital print behind. And our true influence comes from the vision and values that one consistently embodies and share, not just from the position we hold. And I want to thank you, Ethel. She's not here now, but Cynthia, you can pass our regards and also reach out to her. So thank you both for sharing your stories and your strategies and your heart with us today. It has been more than inspiring today. And to everyone who joined us today, whether you're just starting out in your journey or you're already deep into your leadership path, We hope you are leaving this session feeling seen, empowered, and ready to show up fully and fearlessly. And on behalf of Women in TICON Africa and TICON Africa, the general body, thank you again for our amazing panelists. Thank you all for making this session of the Masterclass a success. Let's keep showing up, standing tall, and leading with a presence that cannot be ignored. We look forward to seeing many of you at the TICON Africa Conference in Accra, Ghana, from the 20th to 22nd August 2025. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Those who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world actually will.
So we need to respect knowledge until Africans start to apply knowledge.
The next generation of exponential growth in business is where marketing and ICT comes together.
We can advance ICT solutions for sustainable development.
So we need to think different. We need to begin to be very deliberate, collaborate.
So this technology that they are doing now, that's making internet exciting on satellite,